Hello, everybody, and welcome. I am Stan Bertolud from Nitro Marketing, and I will be moderating today. So one question, can you replace JDE Edwards with SAP S/4HANA, and at what cost and on which timeline? Tom McKee is the enterprise transformation leader at WL Gore. He led the program that retired JDE and brought in SAP, live across 9 plants, 3 countries, and 5 time zones in 11 months with 1 cutover weekend. Tom, welcome. Dominik Karosser is the CEO at CONSILIO Consulting America. Dominik worked alongside Tom in this retirement replacement program at Gore. Dominik will stay throughout the program with us. Welcome, Dominik.
Thank you.
So one thing before we start, Gore is not typical. It's privately held. It has a flat structure, 17 industry lines, and runs both regulated process and discrete manufacturing in the same system. Most of you are not Gore, so I will push Tom on what applies to a normal mid-market manufacturer versus what is unique to Gore. 2 quick asks before we start. First, drop a note in the chat where you are joining us from. And second, the chat will stay open, so send questions as they come up. Tom has agreed to take on tough questions, so please feel free to do so. So Tom, please run us in 1 minute throughout the program.
Okay. Wow. 1 minute. That'll be challenging. I'll do my best. I tend to talk fast, so I'll try not to talk too fast. What we're talking about today, this implementation was part of a broader enterprise transformation. So we are a couple years into this journey. I joined Gore summer of 22, and we've about 18 or 19 different work streams, all looking at about 10, 11-month deployment cycles. This one was specific to our European operations. It covered all 3 operating companies, as well as you mentioned, there were numerous countries. There were 6 or so manufacturing plants, dozens of other sales offices, warehouses, 3PLs, contract manufacturers, and it was a big bang for all of Europe, all at once last November.
Wow.
Europe plus 1 plant in America. Don't forget it.
There was 1 plant that missed an earlier deployment in the U.S. that we also added to that. Thank you, Dominik. I get chastised every time for forgetting that one. So again, the enterprise has been running JDE Edwards for about 25 years or so. This was a big component of this transformation.
Wow, big project, right?
Yes.
So we say you moved from JDE. What alternative did you look at? Did you look at, other vendor, Oracle, Dynamic 365, Infor? I don't know.
Yeah. Yes. So that decision was actually made a couple years before I arrived. And, from what I understand, similar to other companies go through the size of Gore, it really was the fit of the functionality and the capabilities of SAP. I don't think, I know personally, I have nothing against JDE Edwards or Oracle. I'm also a big Microsoft supporter, but the decision was really based when you look at the size, the complexity, the capabilities that were needed. SAP seemed to be the best fit. At the same time, Gore was looking to upgrade its systems around source to pay. So Reba was selected. HR, there are currently 14 disparate HR systems all cobbled together. So a decision to migrate to SuccessFactors. So all things considered, SAP seemed to be the best choice for Gore at the time. And I think it still is today.
Did the board has a role to play in the decision? Who were the key deciding force at Gore, do you know?
Yeah, at the time, it was the executive leadership team and the CEO. And of course, it did require, a recommendation to the board and receiving approval, from the board to proceed in this manner.
Mm-hmm. If would you, given what you know today, would you stick with SAP or would you make a decision, a different decision?
Well, I'm biased. Before coming into Gore, I spent 30 years implementing, using, sponsoring SAP programs. I think it is the right decision. I don't see a need to change. Just understanding, even more so now, the complexities that we have in our business. the capabilities that are needed, and then what the future plans are for Gore from a growth perspective. I think it's the right decision. I don't think a different decision would have been made.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so we're going to switch to the scope now that we talked about the decision to move to S4 SAP. As you were scoping this migration or this transformation, how did you set your target scope on day one, and who signed off?
Yeah. So this implementation for Europe has come after earlier releases were completed in North America. So the approach we've taken is let's define, a standard process template. And, our target is to be 95% fit to standard, keep the core clean. And then as we move forward to other regions, in this case, Europe, it was going through a process adoption. What from our standard business processes, the SAP configurations can be adopted, which ones can be adopted with some slight adjustments to configuration, and then what are some of the new processes, a lot of localization, of course, would drive this, that would have to be created and then made part of our standard process. So, that was the going in approach, is understanding what was a good fit, and then where would we have to make some modifications and or additions.
And I think what's important to mention here is you used more or less the classic SAP Activate methodology with all the phases and the accelerators in it, but you adapted also this methodology that it fits better to your company. And that's also something that we see in many, many other projects. It's a good framework, let's say, yeah, but it needs adaptation, that these methodology really fits good to every business and every customer that we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we use the phrase SAP for SAP. So we are, trying to use as much as possible. And again, it's an evolution. Day one, you're never there. You're not an expert. We're continuing to grow and learn with those tools and capabilities.
I'm curious, did you have any requests from plants that you declined?
Yes, I think, for folks that might be listening in, have been through this before, you deal with it all the time. Everybody's unique, everybody's different. And again, constantly learning. I would not say we're perfect, but that's hard for people to adjust, especially when you've been using a 25-year-old piece of software that's been highly customized. Perhaps, also we found over the years, a lot of capabilities which you would find in ERP had been shifted and moved to some of the MES solutions. So kind of getting people back to understand, this is what ERP is for. These are the capabilities, and a commodity process that the customer won't pay, $1, €1 more for how you do it differently. You should adopt those. Focus on where you're unique. So we do have, a governance program put in place, design councils, architectural reviews. There are several checkpoints where some of these requests could be reviewed. If there's a business case and it truly is different, it could get approved. But it's an ongoing effort to continue governing and trying to have folks understand where you should adopt standard, where standard makes sense. And the other benefit of that is you look to the future and you continuously improve those standard processes, you get the flywheel effect. So if every plant is doing this process the same, you make an improvement, everyone gets to share in the benefit. So, but it's an ongoing journey.
And you make it sound easy, but I'm sure you had some pretty tough discussion, right? Can you walk us through some of those, and how did you handle the pushback?
A lot of tough discussions. Again, we continue to improve the process. A lot of it is understanding, well, what are the options? Why will standard not work for you? What is the impact on the customer, on revenue, on cost perhaps? And if folks feel strongly that they really need to be unique and something different, this can be escalated to the business leader, who then understands what are the implications, business impact and outcomes, but also what's the ongoing cost to implement a customization or do something different. So it's, again, it isn't easy. If I made it sound easy, that wasn't the intent. It's it's a daily journey.
Right.
Well, this is something I really have to give a shout out here to Gore and Tom specifically, because the way that this company is dealing with this kind of situations is really unique in what I have seen in the last 20 years since I'm working in the SAP business.
How
Because
come?
we see this all over. We have those old implementations, independent if it's an Oracle or Dynamics or even old SAP systems. Yeah, they have very unique solutions implemented, or even solutions that are in its original ERP solutions that have been outsourced somewhere into MES systems or whatever. They want to stick to those solutions and they want to keep it because they're their own. And they always have good reasons for that. But the way that Gore is dealing with that is really the best I've ever seen. And I just recommend to all companies who are on kind of that path that Gore is now or will be in the future, that they really follow this kind of advice, I would say, yeah, to have a good change management here and to really have a framework established which walks the company through this process of, do we really need a specific implementation for this specific business in this specific country, or can we use our standard template?
Yeah, and this starts at the top. If I could add on real quick, I mean, the CEO is very engaged. The enterprise transformation is one of our top 2 enterprise priorities, and there are guiding principles that were established early on. And one of them is adopt standard, as much as possible, put that governance in place. So highly recommend, you've got to have that top-down buy-in and support.
Right. Well, you were talking about the templates. I mean, sometimes the template breaks, right? Sometimes the template don't work. How did you save that? How did you make sure, or did you have any specific instance where the template was not making it?
Of course, there are some cases where, if a site may have a lower lack of maturity when it comes to business processes, or I'll tell you another example that we saw is over the years, as product lines might have been moved from one manufacturing plant to another, the new line coming in didn't always adopt the processes that were already in place. A lot of times those processes were brought with the product line. So as you get deeper into the details, you find out, oh, wow, this plant does production planning 3 different ways, for example. And sometimes you can catch those early enough to standardize before the go live. In some cases, we had to accept and adopt multiple ways of doing things. And then later down the road, we can look at opportunities, continuous improvement to consolidate where it makes sense. So, and that is one of the challenges. I think, the folks are going through this seat all the time on the surface. One of my favorite stories is, oh yes, we run MRP today. And then when you go into the details, people run MRP, material requirements planning, but they don't actually take the output and use it. So you really have to start, asking questions and really understanding how the operations are run in the end-to-end process.
Right. We are going to switch now to the timeline. I started by saying 11 months. First of all, why 11 months, not 12, not 10? And then how does it feel once you engage yourself to say, okay, we're going to implement SAP within 11 months? I mean, that must be pretty scary. You need to move an entire organization, which is very complex, very, many sites, countries, etc. How did you feel personally as a leader of the project, and what made it possible, and also why 11 months?
Yeah. A lot of good questions. So first of all, several years ago, we established an enterprise transformation office that works with the 3 operating companies and the functions on the implementation. So at any point in time, we have multiple implementations going on. Some just might be kicking off, they're early in the design phase. Other ones might be building and testing, and other ones are post go live. When we looked at our plan on a page and the amount of time that we need to devote to each phase, requirements, validation, design and build, multiple sit cycles, UAT training, 11 months seemed to be the right amount of time. I wish it was shorter, but it was the right amount of time to drive, a lot of the change, a lot of the adoption, because, as we all realize, these are not just, IT implementations. These are, business implementations. They're change management. It is driving the adoption, bringing people on board and getting the buy-in. So, trust me, a lot of folks, even 11 months, weekly, monthly, folks are saying, oh, we're not going to make the date. We need more time. So one of the mantras we developed was, what will it take? Don't come forward and say, I need more time. Look at, what do I need to make it happen? And then, is it getting decisions made faster? Is it looking at scope? Is it getting more resources? So it's a mind shift that, again, we're still working on it, but we're getting better at it. It's very easy to say, oh, stop. And, Gore had actually started this transformation around 2015, and there was a lot of start and stop. And I think part of it, having not been here, was when issues were encountered, it was very easy to say, oh, we need to stop. But now it's applying some of the lean, Toyota production system concepts, doing the 5 whys, understanding the problem statement, and how do you solve it.
All right. So we've got a question, and just a reminder for everybody listening, feel free to ask any question you've got in the chat there. So Maren is asking, was it difficult to get everybody on board? And I think we covered that, but is there anything you want to add to this?
I just think you have to be vigilant. And again, back to, it needs to be an enterprise priority. It needs to have support, from the CEO on down. One of the other approaches that we applied is this don't blink. As leaders, you'll get bombarded over and over again. People are going to say, oh, you have to stop the implementation. You have to stop this. We're not ready. And the minute you blink and show, a weakness, it's back to, okay, what are the reasons? What will it take? What's the problem statement, and what countermeasures do we have to fix it? But again, it is never ending, especially when you're looking at an enterprise that has used the same system, the same process for 25 years. It's highly customized, a lot of workarounds, a lot of offline tools. Excel continues to be the #1 digital platform in most companies. And so you have to be vigilant, and it never ends. And you have to tie it back to, what is the business outcome that you're trying to drive? And then, what does it mean to me? How do I personalize it in my way of working? And that's, again, it's not easy. It's hard.
Well, that's a good transition to Jack's question here. Can you comment on the business processes benefited, or what business processes benefited the most? Quote to cash, procure to pay, financial close?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll answer it this way. I think there are and will be benefits across all of them. And, we're struggling with, and again, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. We've had some plants that have struggled post go live. The ones that are less mature, let's say, it's been a bit of a heavier lift. But as folks post go live start to use the system more, get over the impact of the change, we're starting to hear some of the feel good stories that, oh, wow, I can do this all within the system now. This saves me 3 or 4 steps. And again, I want to counterbalance it with, there are sites that have had to add some temporary help to get through the learning curve and the change curve and deal with the changes. So, we're starting to see these stories now. Some of the plants on other implementations, not the one we're talking about specifically in Europe, we've had some US sites that have been live for a year, 2 years now, and they're starting to come forward and say, oh, the visibility I have now on my inventory, ATP checking is much better. It's much simpler. Having better visibility to what's happening in manufacturing. So we're starting to get some more and more of those feel-good stories.
How large was the team at Gore in charge of this program at peak?
So we're still in the middle of it. We're still at peak. We still have 7 active work streams that are looking to deploy multiple waves of this between now and next May, as well as a team still providing post go live support in Europe. We have a transformation office that's 100-ish associates. Each of the operating companies have digital teams and IT teams, as well as subject matter experts from the business. We're starting to increase how we use process owners, key users, and that's another learning and taking forward. I think the earlier you can establish process ownership, and a key user network, the better off you are as well. That helps.
And Dominik, what about you? How big of a team did you have to support?
Just wanted to jump in there, yeah. So from a configuration perspective and from a consulting perspective, it was very challenging those 11 months because we had to parallelize a lot. We had to parallelize configuration, workshops, testing, documentation, etc. And that's why we had at the peak between 45 to 50 consultants, which were, well, not all full-time, but I would say the majority was really full-time engaged to the project at the peak.
Wow. What was the slowest part of the schedule, Tom?
This is a lesson learned. In fact, we conducted a Kaizen last month on this. During the sprints in the design and build process, we tend to be slow on making decisions. And there's a little more pushback. Back to your earlier question, how do we deal with resistance? And what ends up happening is you get to the end of a sprint and realize these things didn't get done. Let's push them to the next sprint. And you start to snowplow the work. So it's that upfront. And this was, again, I think everyone realized it, but now we're putting countermeasures and controls in place. How do we get better at business engagement, making design decisions, adoption decisions quicker so we don't push work from the sprints to the end? Because then it starts to spill into sit cycles. Then it spills into UAT. And then you have, scoping decisions to make throughout the process.
Tom, do you know someone called Sasha Perkun?
Yes, say Sasha. Yes, I do. Yes.
So Sasha has a long story here, and in fact, it got cut, so we won't know exactly what he said. But I was looking at this comment before, and apparently, you guys managed to create an incredible culture, right? Do you want to comment on what Sasha is saying there?
Yeah, and Sasha was a key component of our success, this deliverable last November in Europe. And I think, hits on a couple things we've been talking about is upfront, it's very easy for people to say, we can't do it. 11 months, 12, not enough time. And we really have had to learn how to do this. Again, a lot of start and stops up until 2022. Wasn't really a strong framework, a methodology. So, we have put a run book in place. We're using the SAP activation tools that Dominik mentioned. Our partners have come together and help us build this muscle. Is it perfect? No, but we continue to get better with each cycle. And then we do conduct Kaizens afterwards to learn what could we do differently, what could we do better. So again, a lot of it though is you've got to have that vision and here's where we're going and what will it take to get there. I mean, we all know the 1,000 reasons why something won't happen. What do you need to get there and how do we get those resources, make those decisions? But Sasha, thank you. It was good to hear from you.
Well, I can just also say it was a pleasure working with Sasha. Sasha was part of the project management team. And one of the really great things that we had is we had a lot of on-site work. And that was what Gore was really forcing us to. Many companies nowadays say, oh, traveling is very expensive. And I agree, it is. But can we do this remote? Can we do some remote workshops? I understand that, and I always say like it's a 50-50 thing between being on site and being off site. It also has advantages and disadvantages for us as consultants. But with this short time frame given of 11 months and this intensity that we had, it was really great to have most of the people a lot of times on site at the plants, working with these guys, just going through a door to meet them and say, hey, I have a question. Can we clarify this? Hey, just let's get together. Or even during lunchtime, just have a chat about something that's project related. It was really, really a big advantage.
So we've got another question, and this one is for you, Dominik. Can you comment on some of the challenges that having multiple SI partner and consultants in knowledge transfer of the SAP template in regard to adopt, adjust, add, and abstain from the previous release BPH in the US implementation? So I'm not sure I understand everything, but I'm sure you do.
Yeah, I do, because Frank is also well known and was also part of the project. And Tom already described it. It's a huge program, so you can just imagine there are multiple SI partners working in that program, and even in the releases. Well, I think you did not mention it yet. At the end, it will be 7 releases that we have. The one that we're specifically talking here about was the release 4. So yeah, also in this release 4, we have multiple SI partners, and yeah, especially in the knowledge transfer, you need to have someone who's guiding all those activities. Not only the knowledge transfer, also you need someone who is guiding the first steps in the explore phase to say, okay, if there are multiple SI partners. So like, good example is quality management. Quality management, from my perspective, was one of the best areas where you can describe working with multiple SIs, because we had a lead that was from a different SI partner where I can tell it was IBM. IBM is also a partner from CONSILIO and a well-known partner from Gore. So we worked with them in this release, and the lead was from IBM, and we had 2 consultants from CONSILIO in that area in quality management, and that really worked very well. They worked perfectly together. We had these multiple plans, so they always had a prepare meeting for every topic that they want to discuss in the workshops. And they said, okay, this is what we want to show. And they did it together. And then they split up into the separate plans. But they told the plans exactly the same. And after that, they came back with the feedback and they said, hey, I had this feedback from plant A, I had this feedback from plant B. That fits. Okay, so that looks like that this is more a global thing that we have to discuss here. And this is how it worked in every area of the project, and even what Frank mentioned also in the knowledge transfer.
Yeah. If you had more time, let's say 14 months, what would you have done differently or added to the project?
I'm a big believer. Sometimes when you add more time, the time gets squandered. I mean, you need to maintain the aggressive schedule. How do you continue to improve to make decisions quicker? Find what is needed to get it done. I've experienced in the past where we've added time, and we've had a couple extensions on some of the work streams. So it's not that it doesn't happen. Business decisions get in the way. You have to run the business. You have to make some decisions sometimes that are right for the enterprise that has an impact on some of the timelines. But just by arbitrarily saying add 3 months, it doesn't always benefit you. There's not much more you can get done. And just that, and Frank, again, was a big part of our success here. And looking at it from the Gore perspective, and Frank lived a lot of this as well. It's that ongoing consistency of message with the multiple partners, because this is global and we're working in all regions on different timelines. We've had to use multiple partners, and they all have their ways of doing things. So it is also coming to a consensus on how are we going to have one approach, taking the best of the methodologies that each partner uses with the frameworks that Gore has built, and align on working together using the same tools and methodologies. So good question.
All right. So moving on, we are now at the cut date, the cutover weekend. I'm sure you've got palpitations, sweating. Are we going to make it or not? So walk us through the 72 hours around the go live. Which country went first? And again, how does it feel to be, on the verge of migrating and turning on a new system, which is going to impact the entire enterprise?
Yeah, so this release in November, it was a big bang, all of Europe, and Dominik hit on some of this before. There are several releases on our, let's say, less regulated instance. We have 2 instances. We've got a highly regulated med device instance, and then let's say a lightly regulated non-med device that covers 2 other operating companies. So both instances had to go live across all the countries, all the different sites throughout Europe. Teams focused on both. Transformation office kind of coordinating, working with both of them to get there. So there had to be a lot of alignment, this process. As folks are going through this, understand a lot of activities happen earlier before the cutover weekend. When can you start the data loads and validations? But I would say the cutover was very well orchestrated, and the fact that it wasn't the first one that we had done, there were a lot of lessons learned baked into it. And I don't want to say the cutover was a non-event because people worked very hard. There were some challenges and issues with some of the data where folks worked 24 hours going back, revalidating, correcting some of the data. But the cutover, I think, surprised a lot of people how smooth it went. Number of defects, number of high critical defects that were resolved quickly. It really wasn't until 30 days post go live as this started to sink in when some of the post go live challenges popped up that had to be remediated.
Did you have
add anything to the cutover?
Did you have a rollback trigger in place?
We had several go, no-go stage gates throughout the implementation cycle after each round of testing. But once we made the decision, a few weeks before go live that we were a go, it was just, all hands on deck, let's move forward.
And who was in charge of the final go, no go?
Each of there's a hierarchy. The teams have to, recommend and be on board up through the business leaders for each operating company, and then ultimately up to our steering committee, which was the executive leadership team, and ultimately, the CEO signing off to say, okay, looking at the metrics, looking at the risk mitigation plans,
Okay.
we're moving forward.
So you, once again, you make it feel like, everything was under control. Did you actually get some sleep before that deadline?
Actually, we have a very strong team that's been developed that enabled me to get some sleep. I mean, I just really had to make tough decisions, maybe sign some checks when it came to needing more consulting help. There were a lot of people that had sleepless nights that worked very hard. And, these things are never easy. But again, the much as you can stick to the discipline and the rigor of your methodology, and look, nothing ever goes 100% as planned. How do you quickly mobilize, get to the root cause, address the situation? But
we were
it was smooth compared to some I've seen. Go ahead, Dominik.
We were very good prepared at the weekend itself, not only in terms of technology and SAP. We had organized food, drinks, all that stuff. And it sounds funny, but honestly, this is as important as all the technology stuff is, because that keeps the motivation high and that lets the people go the extra mile.
Right.
Yeah. And there were technical support teams from the partners, from SAP, on call, monitoring, attending checkpoints, multiple checkpoint calls, throughout the process.
Sleep is overrated.
There's the spirit. So
yeah. All right. So now we are live, and I wonder, did you what could you measure within the first 12 months that got better on SAP now that the system is live? Is it about the inventory accuracy, months end close, order to cash, cost to serve, planner productivity? I mean,
yeah, it's a mixed story. So this implementation last November, we're now 6 months post go live. There have been a couple plants that had challenges. I'll be honest, after the first 30 days, and we really started to ramp up business, and we also saw volume increase in certain markets that really took off, that compounded. How do you ramp up and learn new processes, new system capabilities, new tools? We had revenue gaps into the quarter, the January to March quarter, at the end of our fiscal year. There were extra bodies thrown at it in some cases. As we also traversed the learning curve, certain things got easier. So there were challenges, but I will say through the quarter, the opcos all closed their revenue gap. A couple sites had record shipping months. Now, some of it was brute force, making things happen, but it's rallying around the new processes and the new tools to make it happen. We're starting to get more and more stories now, 6 months later, specifically how the order to cash process, how order entry is simpler, how I can have better visibility to inventory. Some of the visibility on the shop floor. We've had a couple plants that, I would say they were more mature going into this. they're now, using more and more of the capability. They're using MRP better. They're making more proactive decisions on the shop floor. So my experience has been, it takes a little while to settle in, to really get over the hump, resolve some of the issues. And then 6, 12, 18 months, you start to see more and more of these success stories that, that are measurable and impactful.
Yeah, I mean, people have been using JDE for years, and all of a sudden you are testing them with a new interface, new product. How do you move them along?
Not only this, like we also had some modules where we really had a paradigm shift. So not only a technical change, so like implementing PPDS is like the first time that they are really working with a system-guided detailed scheduling system. So that is, again, not only a shift from one system to the other technically, it's really a completely different way of thinking. And that's something that they have to learn with productive data, how to analyze the data, how to use the data, and how to maximize the value that a module like PPDS is giving.
Yeah, and if I could just add on to that, as we know this from Kaizens, as I mentioned, understand the pain points coming out of November, and a couple of themes really resonated. One is, before you even implement SAP, how do you improve your business acumen around end-to-end business processes? Understanding, if I do something on the front end, what are the downstream and upstream impacts? So if I change the date on a customer order, what happens to MRP, ATP? What happens to the shop floor? It sounds simple, but it's a theme I've seen over the years, and we saw it here, very clearly. How do you enhance your training moving forward, just from clicking buttons? This is how I use SAP, to really understanding how my role changes, my way of working changes, and really understanding the impact, again, upstream and downstream through the end-to-end process. So understanding, again, as simple as it sounds, clarity on make to order versus make to stock. That's just, it sounds basic, but it really is that business acumen. What does good production scheduling look like? And then layer in the technology. So, these are things we're taking moving forward to continuously improve and baking into our future deployments. So it's not just about clicking buttons. And the other thing I would say is understanding you just can't look at an old system like E1. It doesn't translate directly to SAP. It really is getting people to, in a way, forget everything you know about the old ERP and really learn the new system and the capabilities.
So I know you are just 6 months in, but do you have a percentage of plants that hit their productivity target? And what did the one that missed have in common to each other?
The first 6 months, you are a lot in survival mode. It's, just really coming up to speed. And again, even though there was let's say, a revenue gap where we fell behind on, confirming orders with customers, getting behind on delivery, the one plant that struggled the most, they actually had a record shipment month in March. And I realized some of it was just brute force, it just pushing it out. But it really shows the capabilities. If you can exceed your prior record by 30%, imagine as you get into really simplifying your processes, using the tools better, the new SAP capabilities, understanding your processes, what you're capable of. You start to take that friction out. If you can achieve that record of volume with all the friction that still remains, as you continuously improve, imagine what you can do.
Right. So we've got another expert comment here. Maybe Dominik, do you want to comment on what Frank is saying here about ATP and PPDS?
Well, yeah, I think that's a comment which is absolutely right. Yeah, ATP, I think, was not only rolled out, was completely implemented new. There were a lot of plants who never used any kind of availability check here. And yeah, well, it's interesting that Frank is mentioning MTO, ATO, because this is something that I think Gore and especially plants who are alive is still struggling with. What is the right planning strategy? Yeah, we have Kaizens going on right now about planning strategies. Is it MTO, MTS? So yeah.
Yeah, if I could just add on to that, it's the other thing to watch out for. People get enamored with the bright, shiny new object. So, PPDS, it's a great tool, but if you're not doing detailed scheduling today, if you're not doing capacity planning today, can you get by with, the basic SAP MRP capabilities? You can always grow into it. So that's, one of the things we've also had to try to manage is you aren't going to go 0 to 60 on some of these tools. If you're managing your shop floor on paper today, let's start off with some of the basics and understand the process, understand MRP, good shop floor execution, and then you can grow, you can earn the right to do more detailed scheduling, more detailed planning. But as we all know, the digital piece is not the silver bullet. It doesn't solve all the problems.
So what were the real 3-year total cost of ownership, including post-go live stabilization, change order, and internal team cost compared to the business case that actually got approved?
Yeah, and again, there's no easy answer to some of these. We had an original plan. So 4 years ago, when I joined, we redid the plan. We had an initial timeline of 2.5 to 3 years. We've now extended it. By the time we finish next May with all the deployments globally, it'll be closer to a 4.5 year program. So of course, the time unfortunately adds cost. So we are looking at we will exceed the budget. Probably 25-30%ish, if you will. And again, it's not due to lack of governance or rigor. It's extending the timeline. It's splitting and going to multiple instances now. The original plan had a single instance. So there's some cost there. There's the organizational change that I'll admit I underestimated some of the complexity. When you go from one company, now dozens of legal entities, operating companies, now you're baking in intercompany transactions with transfer pricing and VAT and everything else. It's added some complexity we initially expected. So of course, that answer doesn't go over well with the board and others, but it is the reality, unfortunately, as we've uncovered the complexity and we extended some of the timelines. So again, and folks on the call know this, much as you can hold to the timeline, the better it is.
What do the CFO says now about the business case, looking back at what you've done?
Well, ironically, we have a new CFO who joined a couple months ago. So the jury's still out. Fortunately, he has a lot of ERP experience. So he's been through this. So one, there's an understanding and awareness of the complexity and also the change management. Again, when you've not looked at your processes, you've not had a new ERP system for 25 years, it's an environment. We had over 2,000 custom apps as well, and trying to drive all this into standard processes, learning new ways of working. It's a challenge, but the new CFO understands this. So again, it's just trying to understand where we are and where we go from here.
All right. So we couldn't not talk about AI. Are you running any AI assisted workflow on the new stack today?
Yeah, I'm surprised it took 44 minutes to touch on AI, because every other conversation, like the third minute in, AI comes up. I'd like to use more. It's a conversation we've had with our partners is how do we incorporate more AI in the implementation process? We have developers who are using AI, with some of the coding that they're doing. We're trying to leverage, how do we start piloting some of the tools embedded, like, WalkMe and Joule. I understand next week at Sapphire is going to be heavy Joule. Looking forward to it. We actually had a deployment this past Monday in Success Factors. We implemented a position management capability with WalkMe fully embedded. So it really is our first venture into that tool and capability. So again, it's out front and center as we move forward. How do we use more and more, not just to implement, but also leverage what our partners like SAP are embedding into the capabilities.
And I wonder, if you were scoping a second instance or a subsidiary tomorrow, what public cloud assumption would you change in your approach?
It's a complicated question. I think it varies, from company to company. And we actually, made the switch, initially Gore was going down a public cloud path to private cloud. We have some limitations, selling into defense industry with CMMC and some of the DoD requirements. So I think it really comes down to a case-by-case assessment, depending what the company's needs are.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we see right now is, especially the smaller companies, let's say with a revenue of 500 million and below, they are really approaching the public cloud path. And public cloud is also growing. One of the advantages of public cloud is you get an update every 3 months, and it's really growing from a tool perspective that's delivering, and also, yeah, you can extend it. The extension possibilities of the public cloud with the BTP, they are also growing. So there's a lot of potential right now. And SAP itself, it's forcing public cloud extremely. So I think, as far as I heard from some of their sales guys, they are trying to get 80% public cloud sales in their annual goals. So yeah, public cloud will be a big thing the next month and years, next to AI.
Yeah, thanks. Well, going back to AI, we've got a question here about your own strategy. And yes, Sapphire is going to be AI is going to be top and center at Sapphire. So what about you? What about your own Gore AI strategy?
Yeah, I think part of it we talked about a couple minutes ago, the things that we're leveraging. Each of our operating companies, their IT departments, of course, are already using AI, whether it's Copilot, Claude, other tools on looking at operational efficiencies, productivity. At the enterprise level, we also have a breakthrough AI team that the CEO has kicked off, and it's looking for those bigger wins that are really impactful. Whether it changes the way we do business, it's benefits to the customer, whether it's products and services. So multiple fronts, whether it's breakthrough, it's looking for the efficiencies that the businesses are driving, or it's how are we leveraging the tools through implementation and from the user perspective.
Right. So we are reaching the end of this session. We covered a lot of ground. Thank you so much for your honesty. What would you tell a CTO at a large US or mid-sized US manufacturing company who is just like you, thinking of moving from JDE Edwards to another ERP and probably to SAP?
Again, I think it's really understanding what your business needs are, what's the future direction, what capabilities does the enterprise need to serve its customers, to optimize its business processes. And again, it does vary based on size of company, I think, as Dominik has hit on a couple times. But to me, it really is about which partner, which solution has the capabilities that fit your needs today and that can grow with you. Is either you expand into new markets, there's new processes, new capabilities that are out there. What other ancillary solutions integrate seamlessly as well?
So I want to invite everybody in the audience to ask any question if you have now. When we prepared this interview, you mentioned something about the 7 years of transformation that resulted in almost nothing. And then all of a sudden, you started seeing change and implementation. And what was the inflection point? And can you take us back to this conversation we had?
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I know in my first 90 days, I had to make a presentation to the global leadership team. There were 100 plus leaders. And my first slide, I shared what I'd been hearing the first 90 days. And it was comments like, we've tried this and failed. This won't work here. We're different.
And sorry, they were talking about migrating from...
About the transformation itself, implementing SAP, Ariba, Central Finance, all the tools that we were looking at. cloud migration. And it was just a mindset that it just wouldn't work here. So a couple things. One, the CEO was very clear. This is one of the top 2 priorities. And the transformation is not just SAP. It is, it's the org, it's people, process, technology, in that order. And this is something we were going to do, and everybody get on board, and we're all part of the solution. It's not an IT project. So again, that consistent drumbeat from the top, that this is foundational, and it doesn't end with the go live. I mean, it's not the finish line, it's the starting line. And how do you build upon it now? Continuously improve, use more capabilities. So that was a big part of it. But then it was ongoing change management. Every conversation with folks, flipping the narrative from, don't tell me why it hasn't worked here. What will it take? What do you need? And then we had another mantra that we started, was, you can't look out 3 years or 5 years. You get overwhelmed by the work that has to be done. So how do you break it down? Win today, win the week, win the milestone. So just modular components. And if you're successful in doing it today, what you said you would do, translate that into getting done in the week, and then the next milestone. And what you find is you start to stack small wins, and it starts to lead to success. And we all want to be a winner. We all want to play on a winning team. And I think as we started to get some deployments behind us, there was an awareness that, wow, we can do this. And so those are the 2 things I would point to, that ongoing change management, flipping the narrative, getting people to think differently. And look, not everyone's going to make the ride. We realize that. You've got to be very selective on, who can help drive this. But the biggest thing was really, top down. One of our top 2 initiatives. This is a priority.
Yeah. Before we close, anything you want to add, Dominik, Tom, to this discussion?
Do you want to go first, Dominik? Or do you want me to go first?
No, I want you to go first.
Okay. I think I hit on a couple of things earlier. I mean, one, make sure this is an enterprise priority. You've got support from the CEO on down. Make sure the governance model is in place. Focus on end-to-end process knowledge, and also, process owners who can make those decisions about requirements that deliver the business outcomes that they're being held accountable to. Focus on building the business acumen. Again, folks understanding, I'm not just clicking a button, but my role, how does it impact the upstream, the downstream part of the process? And I think just that consistency, and just ongoing, that we can do this, we will do it, we have to do it, and tying it to the future vision. How will this help us better serve our customers, help better run our plants more effectively, etc.
All right. Thank you so much. Anything to add, Dominik?
Well, I think there is nothing to add from project perspective or something like that. I just really want, first of all, thank you, Tom, that you took the time today to talk about the project. And yeah, for me, one of the most important things in this project was really the open partnership that we had and still have. We are engaged still in a couple of parts of this project. And we never have hide anything. So whenever there was an issue on one of the sides, we brought it up and we discussed it openly. When we saw something on your side and the other way around, it was always, hey, can we have a short chat? Can we have a call? We had a regular meeting every week, and we really were very open, also in terms of people, in terms of resources, if resources were not performing, if we needed additional resources. So it was really very open, and that's what I liked. And I really like working with Gore. I really like working with Tom, and it is still a pleasure. And that's what I wanted to mention at the end.
Yeah, and we could feel that from the comment of the team today. So congratulations. Thank you, Tom, so much for this honest conversation. Thank you to the audience for joining us today. We will have more CONSILIO Live in the coming weeks, so stay tuned. Yeah, thank you so much for your time today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.